The chamber was massive. It stretched high above the gathered representatives, with walls that seemed to shimmer and change color. Captain stood at the back of the observation deck, watching the proceedings below. He wore his military uniform, dark blue with silver insignia on the shoulders. His face remained calm, but his eyes moved constantly, taking in everything. Below him, the Galactic Council sat in their designated sections. There were hundreds of species present. They looked like living crystals, refracting light in rainbow patterns. They floated in containment fields, their gaseous bodies swirling with thought. They stood on powerful legs, their scaled skin catching the artificial lights. Dozens more species filled the chamber, representing civilizations that spanned thousands of worlds. At the center of the floor stood the had seen many alien species in his 15 years of service. The still caught him off guard. They resembled insects from Earth, specifically mantis creatures, but much larger. They stood nearly 7 feet tall on 4 legs. Their bodies had hard shells that shimmered with blue and green colors. 2 additional limbs folded against their thorax, ending in delicate manipulators. Their heads were triangular, with large compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. The leader was called. He stood at the defendant's platform, his posture straight despite the weight of judgment pressing down on him. Behind him, 3 other representatives waited in silence. "The council recognizes the charges," announced the council speaker, a named X. His voice boomed through translation devices, converting his speech into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "The species has been found guilty of biological incompatibility with civilized space." His colleague Park stood beside him. She was one of Earth's best. She had short dark hair and wore practical clothing covered in pockets for her equipment. She shook her head slowly. "This is wrong," she whispered too. "They haven't done anything criminal." "Tell that to them," replied, gesturing to the council below. The speaker continued reading the charges. They produce chemical compounds through their natural biology. These compounds cause severe reactions in 97% of known species. Exposure results in fear responses, paranoia, aggression, and psychological trauma. Despite warnings, they have refused to undergo genetic modification to eliminate this trait. Spoke then, his voice clicking and chirping. The translator converted it to galactic common language. "We cannot change what we are. This biology is not a weapon. It is simply how we exist. We have isolated ourselves. We have limited contact. We have done everything asked of us. What more can we do?" A representative from the species stood. Her crystalline body rang like bells when she moved. "You ask what more, you can leave. Your presence poisons civilized space. 3 incidents in the past cycle alone. Entire stations evacuated, trade routes closed, economic damage in the billions." "Those were accidents," protested. "We did not intend." "Intent is irrelevant," interrupted a delegate. His gaseous form pulsed with agitation. "The result is the same: fear, chaos, harm." Watched as species after species stood to condemn the. Some spoke with anger, others with what seemed like genuine regret. But the message was clear: they were not wanted. "Earth's representative," the speaker called. "Does humanity have a position on this matter?" Had not planned to speak. Earth's official position was neutrality. They were new to galactic politics, only making contact 40 years ago. Speaking out could damage carefully built relationships. But something in his posture stopped him. The leader stood with dignity, even facing destruction. His people had done nothing wrong except exist. "Earth abstains from the vote," said, his voice clear and firm. The chamber erupted in buzzing, clicking, and various forms of alien conversation. Abstaining was seen as weak, as cowardly. "Very well," the speaker said, calling for silence. "The vote proceeds, all in favor of expulsion." Lights appeared throughout the chamber. Blue lights, each one representing a species voting yes. Counted them. Nearly every single species present voted for expulsion. "The motion passes," the speaker announced. "The species has 60 days to evacuate all inhabited systems. Failure to comply will result in classification as a biological hazard. Such hazards may be eliminated by any means necessary." The words were clinical, but the meaning was clear: extermination. Bowed his head. His mandibles clicked together softly. Behind him, one of the other made a sound like wind through hollow tubes. Grief realized. That was the sound of grief. The council began to disperse. Representatives floated, walked, or slithered toward the exits. Within minutes, the chamber was nearly empty. Made a decision. He walked down the stairs to the main floor, followed him quickly. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Something probably stupid," he admitted. Remained at the platform with his delegation. They stood together, their heads lowered in what looked like conference. When approached, they turned to face him. Captain said, he knew his name, they had done their research. "Have you come to express Earth's regrets, or perhaps to ensure we understand the deadline?" Neither said, "I came to ask a question. Where will you go?" His compound eyes reflected its image 1,000 times. "There is nowhere. We have checked every database. Every star system within our range is claimed by one species or another. We are 3 million souls with nowhere to go." "What happens to those who cannot leave in 60 days?" "They die," said simply. "Our ships are old. We can only transport so many. The young and the strong will go, the old, the sick, the very young." He trailed off. Stepped forward. "Your biology, the pheromones you produce. Has anyone actually studied what they do to humans?" Tilted his head, a gesture that seemed universal for curiosity. "No, humans are recent to the galactic community. We have had little contact." "Would you allow me to run tests?" asked. "Scientific tests, to see what effect you have on us." "Why?" asked. "What purpose would this serve?" And exchanged glances. They were both thinking the same thing. It was impossible, it was insane, but maybe. "Because," said carefully, "Earth might have space for refugees, but we need to know if coexistence is possible." The other delegates made clicking sounds, raised one of his delicate manipulator limbs. "You would consider this, after what you witnessed today, after seeing the entire galaxy reject us?" "We witnessed an injustice," said, "and humanity has some experience with being judged for things beyond our control." Was silent for a long moment. Then he extended his limb toward. It was a gesture he had learned from studying human culture, an offer to shake hands. Took the alien limb carefully. It felt cool and smooth, like polished stone. "Test what you need to test," said, "but do not give us false hope, Captain. We have suffered enough." As and left the chamber with the delegation, they did not see the other representatives watching from the upper galleries. They did not see the looks of disapproval and disgust. They had just made humanity's first real enemies in the galaxy. But they had also made a promise, and intended to keep it. The human ship was called the New Dawn. It was not the largest vessel in Earth's fleet, but it was well equipped for diplomatic missions, led and two other through the corridors. The ship's crew stared openly. They had never seen before. Had converted one of the science labs into a testing facility. She wore protective equipment, not because she feared but because protocols demanded it. She had set up monitoring equipment to measure everything: heart rate, brain activity, hormone levels, respiratory function. "Please sit," she told, gesturing to a reinforced chair. "This will not hurt." Settled into the chair carefully, his 4 legs folded beneath him. "How many humans will you test?" 20 volunteers to start," said. "Different ages, different backgrounds. We need diverse data." The first volunteer entered. His name was a young engineer who worked in the ship's maintenance department. He looked nervous but determined. "Just stand close to him," asked. "Yes," confirmed. "We will monitor your responses." Approached slowly. As he came within a few feet, shell plates shifted slightly. The pheromones released into the air. They had no color and no scent that humans could detect. Stopped, his eyes widened. I feel alert, like I've had coffee. My thoughts are clearer. Checked her monitors. Heart rate had increased slightly. Brain activity showed heightened focus, but there was no fear response, no aggression, no panic. They repeated the test with 19 other volunteers. Each time, the results were similar: increased alertness, better concentration. Some reported feeling slightly energized, but no one showed the severe reactions that other species experienced. "It is remarkable," said after the final test. "Your species is immune." "Not immune," corrected. "You affect us, but not negatively. Your pheromones seem to stimulate human cognitive functions without triggering fear or aggression." Entered the lab as the tests concluded. "We need to take this to Earth Command," he said. "Admiral needs to see this data." 2 days later, they stood in a conference room on Earth. The room overlooked the Pacific Ocean through massive windows. Admiral sat at the head of the table. He was an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Around the table sat various officials. Doctor represented the scientific community. Commander Ryu handled security concerns. And there was Shin, a young diplomat who had risen quickly through the ranks due to her brilliant negotiation skills. Presented her findings. She showed videos of the tests. She explained the biological mechanisms. She made it clear humans could live alongside the safely. "This is all very interesting," Admiral said. "But can we afford this? 3 million refugees. That is more than we have ever taken at once." "We have the space," said. She had prepared for this meeting carefully. "Mars settlements have room. Parts of Antarctica are now habitable due to climate restoration. We have 17 planned colony sites that need population." "What about security?" asked. He was a cautious man trained to see threats. "We know nothing about their culture, their laws, how they handle disputes." Had been allowed to attend the meeting. He sat in a specially designed chair at the far end of the table. "We are not violent," he said. "Our species has not had war in 12,000 years. Our biology prevents it. The pheromones that others fear actually promote cooperation and peace among our own kind." "And yet the entire galaxy wants you gone," Admiral noted. It was not an accusation, just a statement of fact. "Fear is powerful," replied. "More powerful than reason. We learned this too late." Doctor leaned forward. She had been studying the biological data intensely. "There is something else," she said. "Something I discovered. The pheromones do not just make humans more alert. They have therapeutic potential. Early data suggests they could help with depression, anxiety, and attention disorders." "You are saying they are medicine?" asked. "I am saying they could be," clarified. "With proper research, they could be more than refugees. They could be partners." The meeting continued for hours. Arguments went back and forth. Some officials worried about the economic cost. Others feared political backlash. The galaxy had made its position clear. Helping them would make Earth a pariah. "That is exactly why we should do this," said finally. Her voice was passionate. "Look at our history. We have been refugees. We have been outcasts. Every wave of migration, every displaced people, every group fleeing persecution. We know what it means to have nowhere to go. We know what it means to be rejected. And now we have the power to say yes when the entire galaxy says no. Is that not what humanity is supposed to be?" The room fell silent. Admiral studied for a long moment. Then he looked at. "If we do this," the Admiral said, "there will be consequences, trade sanctions, political isolation, perhaps even military threats. Can you live with that guilt, knowing that your presence brought harm to humanity?" Mandibles clicked together. "We have lived with guilt for many years. The guilt of being unwanted. The guilt of causing fear without intention. If humanity suffers for accepting us, that guilt will destroy us more than any weapon could." "That was not the question," Admiral said firmly. "The question is, can you live with it? Can you stay knowing the cost? Yes, said after a pause, because the alternative is death for my people, and I will accept any guilt, any shame, any burden if it means they survive. Admiral nodded slowly. I will recommend approval to the UN Council, but the final decision must be theirs. The UN Council met 1 week later. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered. The debate was fierce. Some nations threatened to withdraw support. Others offered immediate assistance. The media covered every moment, broadcasting the proceedings worldwide. Gave the final speech. She stood before the council and spoke without notes. We stand at a choice, she said. We can turn away 3 million souls because accepting them is difficult, because it will cost us, because it will make us unpopular with species we have barely known for 40 years, or we can remember who we are. We are the species that rebuilt after nuclear fire. We are the species that ended slavery and genocide, not because it was easy, but because it was right. We are humanity, and we do not abandon those who need us simply because helping is hard. The vote took 6 hours, nations caucused, arguments continued, but finally the decision came. 184 nations voted yes, 32 voted no, 15 abstained. Earth would accept the refugees. Was present when they told. The leader stood very still. His compound eyes seemed to shimmer, though perhaps that was just the light. Thank you, said. His voice, usually so measured, trembled slightly. Your species has given mine a future. We will never forget this. We will hold you to that, Admiral said, but he was smiling. The announcement went out to the galaxy the next day. Earth would accept all refugees. They would provide land, resources, and protection. The invitation was extended to every in known space. The galaxy's response was immediate and harsh. Trade agreements were suspended. Diplomatic channels went cold. 3 species that had been friendly to Earth suddenly refused all contact. Economic sanctions were proposed. But Earth had made its choice, and in doing so had made an enemy of nearly everyone. Only they called them friends. And for now, that would have to be enough. The first ships arrived 3 weeks after the UN vote. They came in a fleet of 30 vessels, old and battered from decades of use. Each ship carried approximately 100,000, watched from the command center on Mars as the ships entered orbit. They look like they are barely holding together, said, who stood beside him. As security chief for the integration program, he had spent weeks preparing for this moment. They have traveled far, replied, and they carry everything their species owns. The landing sites had been prepared across Mars and in selected areas of Earth. The largest settlement was in the southern desert region of Australia, where vast areas had been cleared and prepared. Temporary housing had been constructed. Water and food supplies were ready. Medical facilities stood waiting. But not everyone was welcoming. In Sydney, protesters gathered outside the government buildings. They carried signs with messages like Earth for humans and send them back. News broadcasts showed similar protests in cities around the world. Some were peaceful, others turned violent. Coordinated the settlement operations from the main base in the Australian desert. She had not slept properly in days. Her hair was pulled back hastily, and her uniform was wrinkled. The first group is landing now, her assistant informed her. 2,000. The ships touched down with clouds of red dust. Landing ramps extended, and slowly, carefully, they emerged. They carried their possessions in packs strapped to their thoraxes. Young stayed close to adults. The elderly moved slowly, supported by others. They looked tired. They looked scared. A young approached. She was smaller than the others, probably equivalent to a human teenager. Her shell had brighter colors than the adults. I am the said. She had chosen a human name. Where do we go? Smiled despite her exhaustion. I will show you. Welcome to Earth. The first weeks were challenging. They did not understand many human customs. They were communal by nature, thinking in terms of group benefit rather than individual needs. This caused confusion with housing assignments, food distribution, and work schedules. Worked closely with cultural advisors to create integration programs. She discovered that communicated not just with words, but with pheromone signals that carried emotional context. Humans could not perceive these signals, which led to misunderstandings. They think we are emotionally blank, explained to during a progress meeting, because we do not respond to their chemical signals, and we think they are too aggressive in conversation because we miss the calming pheromones they release when discussing difficult topics. So how do we fix this? Asked. We teach both sides to compensate. Humans learn to listen more carefully to tone and body language, learn to be more verbally explicit about their emotions. It was slow work, but gradually it happened. Humans and began to understand each other. Then the incidents began. The first was a fire at a housing complex in the Mars settlement. Investigators found evidence of arson. No one was killed, but dozens were injured. The second was a bomb threat at a mixed human school in Australia. Security forces evacuated the building. The bomb turned out to be fake, but the message was clear. Some humans did not want the hear. Increased security patrols. He assigned protection details to community leaders, but he could not protect everyone. The third incident changed everything. In the city of Perth, a construction site collapsed. A 12-story building still under construction fell without warning. The collapse trapped 37 workers. 23 were human, 14 were. Rescue teams rushed to the scene. They worked frantically to move debris and reach survivors, but the building was unstable. Another collapse could kill everyone, including the rescuers. A named was among the rescue workers. He had trained as a structural engineer on his home world. When he analyzed the building, he saw something the human engineers had missed. The entire southern support structure was about to fail. Everyone must leave, said. The building will collapse in minutes. There are still people alive in there, the human rescue coordinator argued. We can hear them. You will die if you stay, insisted. The coordinator faced an impossible choice: abandon the trapped workers or risk more lives. Did not wait for a decision. He ran toward the building. His 4 legs carried him quickly over the rubble. He entered through a gap in the collapsed structure. Stop, the coordinator shouted, but was already inside. For 8 minutes there was silence, then emerged, carrying a young human girl. She was unconscious but alive. He placed her gently on the ground and ran back into the building. He made 3 more trips. Each time he brought out a survivor, 2 humans and 1. On his final trip, as he carried the last person out, the southern support structure failed. The building came down. Tons of concrete and steel crashed into the space where had been moments before. Dust and debris exploded outward. When it cleared, lay on the ground, his shell cracked, 1 leg badly damaged. But all 4 people he had rescued were alive. The media coverage was immediate and worldwide. Images of pulling the child from the wreckage played on every news channel. The girl's parents gave tearful interviews, praising the who had saved their daughter. Public opinion began to shift, not completely but enough. The protests grew smaller. Support groups formed to help integration. Schools invited speakers to talk about their culture. Visited in the hospital. His leg had been repaired with both and human medical technology. He would recover fully. You are a hero, told him. No, said. I simply did what was right. Is that not what humans would do? Some would, admitted, but not everyone. Then we must teach them, said. Both our species, we must teach each other to be better. Meanwhile, made a discovery that would change everything. She was studying the medical applications of pheromones when she noticed something strange in the historical data. The galactic species showed extreme negative reactions to biology, but the reactions were too uniform, too specific. It looked almost like engineering, said when shared her findings. "This looks like genetic engineering." They brought their discovery to Admiral. He reviewed the data carefully. His expression grew darker as he read. "You are saying the galactic species were modified to reject the," he asked. "It is a possibility," said, "but I cannot prove it without access to galactic genetic databases, and those are not available to us." Why would someone do this? Wondered. He had joined the meeting to hear the findings. "Control," suggested. "If the pheromones naturally promote peace and cooperation, then modifying other species to fear them would effectively neutralize their influence." "But who had the power to modify hundreds of species?" Admiral asked. No one had an answer. The months passed, more ships arrived, the settlements grew larger. The two species continued to learn from each other. Agricultural techniques developed over thousands of years proved remarkably effective. Crops grew faster and healthier. Water usage dropped by 40%. Food production soared. Humans taught about art forms their communal society had never developed. Individual creative expression, personal music, solo performances. Young, especially, embraced these concepts. The young who had first greeted became something of a cultural bridge. She attended human schools and taught classes. She posted videos online showing daily life in the settlements. She answered questions from curious humans. "What do you eat?" someone asked in a comment. "Mostly plants," replied in her video response, "but different from human plants. We brought seeds from our world. Would you like to try some?" She held up a fruit that looked like a purple melon. The videos went viral. Suddenly, culture was not scary or alien. It was just different, and many humans found it fascinating. But while Earth and the built their new relationship, the galaxy watched with anger. Trade sanctions tightened. Military vessels began patrolling near human space. The message was clear: Earth had crossed a line. And soon there would be consequences. 6 months after the first arrived, made a breakthrough. She had been working with tissue samples from multiple galactic species, comparing their genetic codes. The pattern she found was impossible to ignore. "Look at this," she told, pointing to her screen. "Every species that reacts negatively to pheromones shares the same genetic modification. It is in their amygdala structure, the part of the brain that processes fear." Leaned closer. The data was clear. Someone had altered these species at a fundamental level. How old is this modification? "That is the interesting part," said. "Based on genetic drift and mutation rates, I estimate this was done approximately 30,000 years ago, maybe more." Who could do something like that? Modify hundreds of species across the galaxy? "I do not know," admitted. "But there is more. Look at humans. Our genetic code shows no such modification. We are clean." "Because we were never part of the galactic community until recently," realized. "Exactly. Which means humans represent what the original, unmodified species were like, and we have no natural fear of the." They needed more evidence. Suggested they consult a historian named Han. He specialized in pre-contact galactic civilizations, studying ancient records that most species had forgotten. Was a quiet man who preferred books to people. He worked in a small office filled with data storage units and old-fashioned paper texts. When it explained their theory, his eyes lit up. "I have found references," said excitedly. "Fragments in ancient databases. They were not always outcasts. There are mentions of them as peacekeepers, mediators, and negotiators. But the records are incomplete. Many have been deleted or corrupted." "Can you find more?" asked. "Perhaps, if I had access to the Galactic Archive network. But Earth's access was revoked when we accepted the refugees." Made a decision. "I know someone who might help, someone who owes humanity a favor." 3 days later, met secretly with a representative from the species. Her name was and she had once served alongside human forces in a border dispute with pirates. She had respect for humanity, even if her government did not. "What you ask is dangerous," A said. They met on a neutral station, in a private room where their conversation could not be monitored. "Accessing sealed archives is a crime." "I am not asking you to do it," said. "I am asking you to look the other way while someone else does." A's scaled face showed what might have been amusement. "You humans are clever. Very well, you have 1 hour. Use it wisely." Worked frantically during that hour. He had remote access to the archives through A's credentials. He downloaded everything he could find about ancient history. The data files were massive. Back on Earth, it took weeks to sort through everything. But gradually, a story emerged. 35,000 years ago, the galaxy had been very different. Hundreds of species engaged in constant warfare, territory disputes, resource conflicts, genocides. It was a dark age that nearly destroyed interstellar civilization. Then the rose to prominence. Their pheromones had a remarkable effect on conflict. When were present during negotiations, violence decreased, aggression faded, species found compromise easier. They became natural peacemakers. For thousands of years, they maintained galactic stability. Wars became rare, trade flourished, science advanced. It was known as the Great Peace. But not everyone wanted peace. A coalition of 7 species, those who had profited from war and conflict, formed a secret alliance. They called themselves the Dominion. Over centuries, they developed a biological weapon, a genetic modification that would make all other species fear and reject the. The plague spread slowly, hidden in trade goods and diplomatic gifts. Within 2,000 years, every major species had been infected. Their descendants carried the modification, and they passed it to their children and their children's children. They could not understand what was happening. Species that had been friends suddenly became hostile. Their presence caused panic. They were driven from one world after another. The Dominion rewrote history. They destroyed records. They created false narratives. They became monsters in galactic consciousness, dangerous to be feared and avoided. And the galaxy forgot the truth. "We need to show this to the," said after reading's report. "They deserve to know what was done to them." They invited, and his advisors to Earth Command. The leader had aged in the past months. The stress of leading his people through such change showed in his movements. Presented the evidence carefully. He showed the genetic data, the historical records, the timeline of the plague, everything they had found. Was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Our elders tell stories, old stories that most consider myths. They say we once walked among all species as friends, that our purpose was to heal division. I never believed these stories were real." "They were real," confirmed. "Your species was betrayed, and that betrayal has echoed through." An ancient named one of the eldest of her kind clicked her mandibles softly. "The guilt songs," she said. "We sing them to remember, but we never knew what we were remembering. We thought we had failed somehow, that we were inherently wrong." "You were never wrong," said firmly. "You were victims." "What do we do with this knowledge?" asked. "The galaxy will not believe us. They will say we invented these records to justify our existence." "Then we make them believe," Admiral said. He had been listening carefully to everything. "We present this to the Galactic Council. We demand an investigation. We force them to face the truth." 2 months later and stood before the Galactic Council once more. The chamber looked the same. The same species sat in judgment, but this time humans and stood together. "You claim to have evidence," the speaker said. "Present it." Presented the genetic data first. She showed the modification shared by all galactic species except humans. She demonstrated how it specifically targeted reactions to biology. Presented the historical records. He showed the fragments from ancient databases, the mentions of as peacekeepers, the timeline of the Great Peace and its end. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species everything. Others demanded to see the source files. A few sat in shocked silence. The representative stood, her crystalline body resonating with anger. These records are fake, fabricated by humans to justify their alliance with biological hazards. The genetic evidence is not fake, countered. Any species can verify it. Your own scientists can run the tests. The modification is there in your DNA. Even if this is true, said a delegate, it changes nothing. The past is past. They are still dangerous to us. Because you were made to fear them, said. The Dominion engineered this. They took away your choice. They made you weapons against an innocent species. The Dominion, the speaker's voice carried disbelief. That is ancient conspiracy theory. The Dominion never existed. Did it not? Asked quietly. 7 species. All of them profited from war. All of them lost power during the Great Peace. All of them have extensive genetic research programs even today. Should we name them? He listed the 7 species. He showed their historical records, their weapons development, their economic gains from conflict. The named species immediately protested. They demanded the humans and be expelled from the council. They called for sanctions. Some even called for military action. But others began to question. Some species requested copies of the data. They wanted to verify it themselves. The council session ended in chaos. No votes were taken, no decisions made, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Over the following weeks, independent scientists from various species began publishing their findings. The genetic modification was real. The historical records, while incomplete, were authentic. The evidence could not be dismissed. But knowing the truth and accepting it were different things. Many species chose to believe the modification was natural, or that it was justified, or that it did not matter. The galaxy issued an ultimatum to Earth. Renounce expel them from human space, or face complete isolation and possible military intervention. Earth had 1 month to decide. Sat in his quarters looking out at the stars, had requested a private meeting. The leader arrived quietly. We will leave, said. We will not let humanity suffer for our sake. Where will you go? Asked. Into the void, beyond known space. We will find empty worlds. We will survive somehow. No, said. That is not what we agreed to. You did not agree to make enemies of the entire galaxy, protested. Smiled. Actually, we did. The moment we said yes to refugees everyone else rejected, we knew what we were choosing, and we choose it again. Why? Asked. Why would you sacrifice so much for us? Because it is right, said simply, and because someone must be willing to stand against injustice, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult. Was silent. Then he placed one of his delicate manipulators on shoulder. It was a gesture of deep respect among his people. Humanity is remarkable, said. The galaxy has forgotten what it means to choose principle over convenience, but you remember, and perhaps you will remind them. The ultimatum from the galaxy arrived with 15 days remaining. Admiral called an emergency meeting of Earth's leadership. Representatives from every major nation gathered via holographic conference. The room was filled with projected images of presidents, prime ministers, and chancellors. We face a choice, Admiral began. The galaxy demands we expel thee or face complete isolation. Trade will cease. Diplomatic relations will end, and they have made clear that military force is possible. How many ships could they bring against us? Asked the Indian representative. Provided the assessment. Our intelligence suggests a coalition of 200 warships could be assembled within 6 months. Earth's fleet numbers 38 combat vessels. Mars has 12. Our colonies can contribute another 20. We would be outnumbered 3-1. Those are not favorable odds, the Brazilian representative noted. No, Admiral agreed, they are not. "Then we must negotiate," said the Russian representative. "Perhaps a compromise that could relocate to a remote system. We maintain diplomatic relations but physically separate them from Earth." Shook her head. "They would still be within human-controlled space. The galaxy wants them gone entirely. There is no compromise position that satisfies their demands." "What if we ask what they want?" said the Korean representative. "It was President, a distant relative of us. They are the ones at risk. Should they not have a voice in this decision?" The suggestion was approved, was invited to address the assembly. The leader stood before the holographic projections of Earth's leaders. He looked tired but maintained his dignity. "Honored representatives," began, "my people are grateful beyond words for what humanity has offered us. You gave us shelter when we had none. You treated us with kindness when the galaxy showed only hatred. You risked everything for us." He paused, his mandibles clicking softly. "That is why we have decided to leave. We will not allow humanity to suffer for our sake. We will gather our people and depart within the week." "Where will you go?" President asked. "Beyond known space. There are unexplored regions, unclaimed systems. We will find a home somewhere if we do not." Did not finish the sentence. The implication was clear. Many would die during such a journey. "No," said, she had not been scheduled to speak, but she stood anyway. "This is wrong. We do not abandon our principles when they become inconvenient." "It is not about convenience," another representative argued. "It is about survival, Earth's survival." "Is it?" challenged. "Or is it about comfort, about not wanting to face consequences for doing what is right?" She turned to face all the projected images. "Our ancestors faced these choices before, when it was dangerous to help refugees from war, when it was expensive to oppose genocide, when it was politically difficult to stand against injustice. And every time humanity chose the easy path, we regretted it. We looked back with shame." "This is different," someone protested. "This is the entire galaxy against us." "Yes," agreed, "which makes our choice even more important. Because if we back down now, we teach the galaxy that threats work, that might makes right, that fear defeats principle. Is that the lesson humanity wants to teach?" The debate continued for hours. Finally, President called for a vote. "All in favor of maintaining our commitment to the refugees, regardless of consequences." The votes came in slowly. Some nations voted yes immediately, others took time to decide, but gradually a majority emerged. 168 nations voted yes, 53 voted no, 10 abstained. Earth would keep its word. Admiral addressed the galaxy the next day. The message was broadcast across all communication channels, stood beside him as he spoke. "We are humanity," the Admiral said. "We have known slavery and abolished it. We have known genocide and survived it. We have known division and overcome it. We will not abandon those who sought our protection. If that makes us outcasts like them, then we will build a better galaxy together." The response was swift and harsh. 23 species immediately severed diplomatic relations with Earth. Trade embargoes were implemented. Human ships were banned from most galactic ports. Economic sanctions began within days. But something unexpected happened. 3 smaller species announced they would not participate in the sanctions. Their representatives made statements supporting Earth's position. Then 5 more species joined them. They were not large or powerful civilizations, but they watched what humanity did, and they chose to stand with Earth rather than against them. Reached out to these species. She proposed an alliance, not to oppose the Galactic Council but to offer an alternative, a coalition based on principles rather than fear. The Free Coalition was born. It started with just 8 species, humans and 6 others, but the idea resonated. Over the next 6 months, more species joined. Many were those who had been marginalized by the Council. Others were simply tired of being told what to think. Meanwhile, and continued their research. They developed a treatment that could reverse the ancient genetic modification. It was not easy. It required genetic therapy over several months, and it was voluntary. "We will not force this on anyone," explained during a press conference. "If species want to maintain their fear of that is their choice, but we offer the option to choose differently." Some individuals from council species traveled secretly to human space to receive the treatment. After the therapy, they reported the same thing. Their fear of the vanished. They could interact normally. Some even formed friendships. Word spread. More came for treatment. It became a quiet revolution. The Galactic Council faced a dilemma. They could not stop their own citizens from seeking the treatment without admitting that the genetic modification existed. But acknowledging it meant admitting the historical truth. 2 years after Earth's decision, a delegation from the species requested a meeting with the Free Coalition. They arrived with a formal apology. "We were wrong," their representative stated. "Our ancestors were victims of biological warfare. We perpetuated that violence by refusing to acknowledge the truth. We wish to join your coalition and make amends." They were the first major species to join. Others followed. The Free Coalition grew to 47 member species. It was still smaller than the Galactic Council, but it represented a significant portion of galactic civilization. The Council itself began to fracture. Some species remained, refusing all contact with the Coalition. Others maintained unofficial relations. A few simply from both groups, declaring neutrality. 10 years after the first arrived on Earth, stood in a park on Mars. The settlement had grown into a proper city. Humans and lived and worked together. Children of both species played in the parks, their differences unremarkable to them. Walked beside him. She was now the primary ambassador for the Free Coalition. Her work had taken her across dozens of worlds. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing at the mixed crowds. "No," admitted. "I thought we would offer shelter and face consequences. I did not imagine we would change the galaxy." "We have not changed it completely," cautioned. "Many species still refuse to accept the old council still exists. There is still prejudice and fear." "But there is also hope," said a voice behind them. It was no longer a frightened refugee but a confident young adult. She had become a teacher, educating both and human children about their shared history. "Hope is what we gave them," continued, "and what they gave us. The knowledge that someone somewhere will stand up when everyone else sits down, that someone will say yes when everyone else says no. That is worth more than all the trade agreements in the galaxy." That evening visited. The old leader was in his final days. Age had caught up with him, but he seemed content. "Your people changed my people," said quietly. "We were refugees, outcasts. We believed we deserved rejection, but humanity showed us we were wrong. You taught us that the measure of civilization is not power but compassion." "You taught us something too," replied. "You taught us that principles mean nothing if we abandon them when tested, that the courage to do right must exist even in the face of overwhelming opposition." "Will the galaxy ever truly accept us?" asked. "Some will, some already have. Others may never change, but that is their choice. You have a home now, your people have a future, that is what matters." Passed away 3 days later. His funeral was attended by thousands. Humans and mourned together. Representatives from 30 coalition species sent condolences. Even some council species sent private messages of respect. Stood at the memorial service and spoke about his legacy. He led his people through their darkest time. He maintained dignity when the galaxy offered only shame. He trusted humanity when he had every reason not to. And because of that trust, both our species are better. The Free Coalition continued to grow. New technologies emerged from the cooperation between species. Biotechnology combined with human engineering produced advances in medicine, agriculture, and environmental restoration. More importantly, The coalition proved that a different kind of galactic society was possible, one based on choice and mutual respect rather than fear and forced conformity. 20 years after Earth's decision, the Galactic Council officially recognized the Free Coalition as a legitimate galactic power. It was not an apology. It was not even acceptance, but it was acknowledgement. Stood before the council chambers, the same place where had once been judged. This time, she was not there to defend but to negotiate. "We do not seek to replace the council," stated. "We seek to offer an alternative, a place where species can choose their associations, where fear does not dictate policy, where the outcasts of yesterday can become the partners of tomorrow." The galaxy remained divided, but the division was no longer absolute. Humans had proven that another way was possible. In a park on Mars, played with a group of children. Some were human, some were from other coalition species. They ran and laughed together, unaware of the battles their parents had fought to make this moment possible. An elderly human woman sat on a bench nearby, watching the children. Her granddaughter was among them, playing with a young. "Are you afraid?" someone asked the woman, "with your granddaughter so close to them?" The woman smiled. "Afraid? No, that was the old way, the way of our grandparents. We learned better. My granddaughter will grow up in a galaxy where fear does not win, where compassion is stronger than hatred, where humanity opened its embrace when the galaxy closed its heart." She stood and walked toward the children. "That is the future we chose, and I am proud of it." Across the galaxy in hundreds of systems, similar scenes played out. Not everywhere, not universally, but enough. The galaxy had rejected but humanity had opened its embrace, and in doing so had opened the door for others to choose compassion over fear. It was not a perfect ending. Challenges remained. Prejudice still existed. Some species would never accept the coalition. But it was a hopeful ending. And in a galaxy that had forgotten hope, that was revolutionary. The story of humanity and the became legend. It was told across worlds. It was taught in schools. It was remembered as the moment when one species chose principle over profit, courage over comfort, and compassion over fear. And that choice had changed everything.